Welcome back to the Noble Fury podcast. We got a crazy cool episode today discussing the state of California. What's going on in California? Why are a lot of people leaving? What happened with the fires? Let's break it down, Jeff, and explain to the world what is going on with California.
California, is that a state in the United States?
Well, it used to be. I think it's a state all of itself.
I thought it was a third world nation.
Yes. Well, you're giving it the benefit of the doubt, aren't you? So if you think about it, Jeff, Hollywood, Silicon Valley, Yosemite National Park, Disneyland, Lake Tahoe, Napa Valley, these are all super desirable travel destinations. People fly in, they go to this beautiful scenery, they see the beaches, they enjoy beautiful food, beautiful weather. Legoland, yes, it's $120 a kid, but you can get into Lego. That might be low. But you go to these wonderful places and enjoy the scenery and the weather and go home and think, California's not so bad. But living there is a different story. And as a former resident of California, 25 plus years in California, working on the fringes of the entertainment industry, which we'll get into in a minute.
Adult entertainment?
Oh, funny. That's good. I wish, right? Except for my wife and kids. Anyway, little salty off color from Jeff today. Anyway, so the point of it all is, California is reeling. I mean, I think they've lost 800,000 people between 2021 and 2022. Now, quickly, when you have a state of 40 million people, you're going to have some churn, but 800,000 people is nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of people, including my family in 2022.
So 39 million and change. It's 12% of the U.S. population. So it takes up more than its share. If you equally distributed each of the states, right, you would expect 1/50th, but 12% is a lot larger than 1/50th. So it's a big state, and I think it has the largest population. Texas is catching up to it, but it's got the largest population.
Texas is catching up because the people from leaving California are going to Texas.
That's right. The free state of Texas, the free state of Florida is expanding too. So California has had only population growth from its inception, 1850, through to 2010. And in 2010, it started turning negative. And this is net migration. So if you take all the different ways that people come into a state, birth, for instance, foreigners moving into the state, other citizens of other states moving into the state.
Are you going to say illegal immigration?
Well, no, that's not counted.
Okay, then we won't say it.
Yeah. So if we take those sources of inflows and then we subtract out the outflows, the natural deaths that happen and so forth, starting in 2010, California started losing people.
Why?
And in fact, it's accelerated since. So since 2020, since the pandemic, California has lost over 1.5 million people. Now, there are many states that are barely hanging on to 1 million people or 1.5 million. So it's a substantial number of people that have left the state. The net migration is the loss of people.
They also, by the way, are calling it like the brain drain because some of the best are leaving California. The higher income people that have had enough, and so it's costing them in terms of technology, in terms of agriculture, GNP, the state GNP.
So GDP,
GDP.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So what I'd like to do is take a look at a few different statistics, sort of framing out where California fits in the collection of states in terms of rankings. And so for the migration issue that we were just talking about, net migration, so we said California's lost over 1.5 million people from 20 to 25 currently. Next in line, and that leads the list, by the way. It is the state that has the greatest net migration out of the state. The next state is New York, then Illinois, then New Jersey, and then Massachusetts.
Do we notice anything about all five of those
states? There's a
pattern
forming, and we'll see that pattern. That same set of states, few different. You'll see Hawaii pop into a few of these.
I'm seeing splashes of blue flying into the screen.
Very much so. Now, in contrast, the states that have had the top inflows of net migration, Florida, the free state of Florida, 872,000 people flowed into Florida. Texas, 747,000.
Wow, that's a lot.
And so those are number one and number two. Here in Tennessee, we're sixth for net inflows, 252. Now, Tennessee is a smaller state. It's not even quite 8 million people, a little over 7 million people, really. And for it to gain 252,000 people is a substantial increase.
Can I say one thing quick?
Yeah.
Knowing, of course, both Ben Shapiro and Joe Rogan both abandoned California for redder pastures. It's a corny analogy between greener pastures and redder pastures. We'll have to work that out later. Anyway, both, Rogan's quote was, that the state had, quote unquote, went nuts and has gone full communist. And Joe Rogan, and Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire, right nearby in Franklin, Tennessee, they take their employees with them. They take their. I
think Ben is domiciled in Florida. But his media organization is here.
Yeah, right. It's in Tennessee for listen, we all know about the lack of regulation in Tennessee, how business friendly it is. We can talk about that a bit. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff, you were saying.
No, that's true. So one of the things we'll look at here is the affordability of housing in a few moments. And
Jeff, we should do a thing on housing. Oh, wait a minute.
We have. And if you haven't seen it,
and if you haven't subscribed,
please subscribe. We can use the subscription.
We're gonna have to edit this out, buddy. Sorry, you were saying.
So this is a very interesting evolution of home prices. So. We've talked about indexes before, and they're typically standardized on 100, the value of 100. And so, in the case of the home price index that the Federal Reserve of St. Louis keeps in its databases, in 1980, the index for California housing would be set at 100. Today, home price index for California would be 966. So that is...
Help us understand, what does that number mean?
Since 1980, right? So you're looking at 45 years, the home prices have increased by a factor of 9.6.
Wow.
Now, that's much higher than most other places throughout the country.
It would have
now,
to
you have serious appreciation elsewhere, but it's really high in California. So that's why somebody who started a family in the 80s and bought a house and they're selling today, they have a substantial amount of equity built up into that house.
Assuming they didn't pull money out, which a lot of people did.
Yeah, and a lot of people did. That's
real estate
true.
bubble
That's true.
of 09. I wonder, by the way, quickly, that thing about ending on 2010 about a growing population in 2010. Do you think the 09 real estate bubble had anything to do with that 10 number of that being the cutoff?
So that's possible. That's very possible that the financial crisis itself had some impact on it, and a lot of the financial crisis revolved around the real estate market, and so there were a lot of people who probably had multiple homes, and they had to sell them and kind of leave the state because they couldn't afford to stay there. That's very possible.
Scale down.
I don't know though. That's just speculation. I really don't know. So. If we go through these various different metrics of sort of state status, we're going to compare states to one another, the top and the worst and the best. So a Gini coefficient is a way economists worldwide use to measure inequality in a population. And so the Gini index is really based on two numbers: a 0, meaning that you have pure equality, as everybody has the same amount of income. If you're using income as the measure, or wealth, if you're going to use a Gini coefficient in wealth, everybody would be equal starting. Yeah, whatever that number is. And if you have a value of 1, then it's perfect inequality. And so one person has all of the income. So suppose a state had income of 1 million and it was perfectly inequality, then you would have one person that had $1 million of income, and everybody else would have 0.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So California ranks 4th, the top 5 worst states for equality. New York is the worst.
You're talking about financial quality, right?
I'm talking about the
Equality.
Gini coefficient.
Gini okay.
Income. This is income.
Yeah, nothing to do with race, gender.
No. This is
Financial.
This is
Gotcha.
this is incomes. So New York is the worst on the Gini index. Connecticut is next. New York is 0.52. We just said 0 was perfect equality. 1 was perfect inequality. New York is 0.52, so it kind of falls midway through. The worst third world nations that you can imagine where inequality was horrific are about 0.65.
Oh, wow.
And so New York is 0.52. Connecticut, 0.5. Massachusetts, 0.4975. California, 0.4953. Louisiana, 0.4915. So we have, of these states, we have a fair number of very democratic states with democratic policies. You would assume that these policies would promote what they say they're supposed to promote, which is equality, affordability of housing, good incomes
A parity,
for
right?
workers.
A financial parity?
Well, a lot of democratic policy proposals, when they're made, they're to pursue that sort of income equality. Their equality of opportunity and so forth is what they claim. It doesn't work out that way.
And why?
Because the policies aren't set up that way. They're set up to help special interests, and those special interests are the ones who gain.
Greed.
And well, they're the greedy gusses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the cost of living, cost of living, California has the third highest cost of living in the country. Hawaii has the first highest cost of living. And so this index is based on 100. And so California is at 134.5. Hawaii is the worst at 179.
That's interesting. I found a U.S. World Report that they had California second behind Hawaii, so it's probably slightly different business matrix.
So it depends on probably when they even did the study.
Sure.
So Massachusetts, number 2 at 148.
Mass.
And New York, to round out, 125. So again, they're not doing very well for cost of living.
With their aspirational, parity, financial parity.
So Texas is, in contrast, 93. Remember, the 100 is the baseline. So 93, that's lower cost of living than average. Tennessee, 90.4.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if we have a ranking, we want to rank states by their tax burden, then we have a distribution that looks very much like what we just saw. So the top 5 highest tax burdens by state: New York, Hawaii, Vermont, Maine, and California.
Sneaks in the top 5, just right there.
Top 5.
Top 5.
Yeah. Highest tax burden.
And interesting, again, this tax burden as a backdrop against the fires, the recent fires, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
The whole thing going on about the taxes, and people may have to pay their taxes on
Let's hit that right now.
Go for it.
So it turns out that you can file relief if your house burned down in the Palisades fire. Then you can request relief. Now you have to request it. Relief from your tax burden, your property tax burden, this year. And they'll grant that until your house is rebuilt, if you've chosen to rebuild your house. And at that time, then they're going to reassess your house. Well, your house is worth nothing. You build a new house, that's worth a lot. But the value...
If you can afford to build a new house, another part of it.
The value of the land is going to have gone up a lot. Suppose you bought...
So you're talking about like a reassessment, in other words.
It is a reassessment.
Yeah.
They'll grant you... They'll grant you a suspension on your tax burden now, but then you open yourself up to a reassessment. Now, you're going to do that if you build a new house anyway, because that's going to be new property, and so they're going to have to assess that property. But the land itself is going to get reassessed for all those people. Now, if you bought your house 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the land value then was much lower. And so when they reassess, that's going to bring it up to current standards on property values. which means that your tax burden your property taxes are going to go up massively when you've got a new house sitting on a currently assessed land value.
Which doesn't even address stepping before the fires, which was, the progressive environmental policies of California is what some say, led to the fires. Then you couple that with the heavy regulation and construction costs in California to rebuild. It's the perfect storm. People can't afford it. I mean, I don't know how they're saying that a lot of people can't afford to rebuild, even with insurance, because insurance is falling short. And that's, of course, if you had insurance, if you could get insurance, that's a whole podcast. The insurance industry pulling out of California. Many people can't afford the premiums. And there's good reason. I think the biggest insurer was State Farm in California, and they stopped writing policies, and then everybody else's prices go up.
So in contrast, the state of Tennessee, they had a large number of homes in the eastern portion of the state that were affected by Hurricane Helene. And
are you about to draw a stark contrast between how California handled the disaster versus?
So these homes were essentially ruined, and so they're going to have to be either destroyed or have been destroyed.
This is from the hurricane
and rebuilt.
in East Tennessee.
East Tennessee affected North Carolina. The remnants of it affected North Carolina and East Tennessee, and Hurricane Helene. And the state legislature passed a bill.
Tennessee,
in Tennessee. That is providing a refund of any tax you paid in 2024.
You get your money back.
You get your money back if you paid it. And moreover, it's 130% of your property tax. So if your property tax...
They're adding a premium on top.
They are. So if your property tax was $5,000, which would be a very high property tax for a house in Tennessee, if it were $5,000, then you would get back something greater than that, $6,500 or something. You would be getting back a fairly large chunk beyond what you paid for property tax.
Seems nice and generous, and
it seems like something you'd want to do for people who lost their homes.
Yeah, and speaking of taxes, quickly, Jeff, just a real world example.
And then if you did, yes, if you didn't pay. You still get the 30%.
Still get they're still not even. Yeah. Quickly, the house that I lived in with my family in Culver City until 2022. I just looked it up today to see what the taxes in 2025 are on our old house because they reassessed it. $30,000, $29,000 and change are the property taxes on a single family home.
Jeez.
In Culver City, California.
How many square feet was that?
2,200 square feet.
2,200, yeah.
30 grand in taxes. Can you that seems
crazy.
Unfathomable. I don't know who can afford that. That's a house payment to most people. It's more than a house payment.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, crazy. So that's the $5,000 example you're giving in Tennessee compared to the $30,000 example I'm giving from California.
That's right. Well, and this happens whenever, and we just talked about real estate last week. So whenever...
That's not posted yet though, Jeff. Don't tell them that.
Oh, okay.
That's a secret. It's coming.
So whenever you have...
it'll be posted by the time we see this phone. Never mind.
So whenever you have a sale and you've had an inflation, people spend all their extra money that they have in inflationary periods in assets, hard assets, to avoid the value destruction of inflation, right? The value of the dollar is destroyed during inflationary periods. And so people try to put whatever money they have, they can have
assets
into hard assets,
right,
like real estate. And so you'll see oftentimes real estate prices shoot up during inflationary periods. And we've seen that during this COVID period.
Before the value of your dollar drops, you want to buy something with it.
That's right. And that increases in value. So that's why gold it usually shoots up during periods of inflation. People put money into gold to preserve the value of their dollar. And they put it in real estate, they put it in the stock market, they put it in whatever asset will hold up under inflationary periods. So the next bit of these rankings are Entrepreneurial Regulatory Barriers Index.
Oh, here it comes.
This is Cato Institute.
So this is good. Are you going to talk about the $20 minimum wage in California, which is one of the highest in the country?
No, this is just. I'm just going to cut right to the chase here on this one. So this is an index of the regulatory burden on the people and the businesses of a state.
The regulations that you have to follow.
So California, out of 50 states, California is 48th. So there's an index called the Freedom Index, and it's freedominthe50states.org. You can look this up. It's got a lot of great information. So these indexes, they have sub-indexes that make up the overall state freedom index. And overall, New York is 50th, Hawaii is 49th, California, just like the Cato index, is 48th in freedom. So we can decompose that overall ranking into economic freedom and debt, the debt of the state, and education. So California on this index ranks 39th in the country in its education. So what are all the high taxes and regulatory burden doing? It's creating an educational environment that's not very good. It's 42nd in terms of state debt. So the fiscal status of California is not very good.
Right.
New York tops all these. So New York is the worst state to be in, but California is very close behind.
Imagine being in a state worse than California.
Well, that's true. That's true. That would be New York.
Yeah,
that would be New York.
I think. Did you want to do one more thing?
Well, I was just going to point out that both Texas and Tennessee, on economic freedom, Texas ranks 6th and Tennessee ranks 4th on economic freedom.
Wow. Yeah. Really strong.
Yeah. In California is, the 48th, and New York 50th, and Hawaii 49th.
And so Tennessee's 4.
That's right.
Or 6.
So public school systems, we just kind of work through that a little bit. New York has actually a pretty good public school system. It's ranked 8th in the country. This is by a different ranking organization, a school.
That depends who you ask.
That's true. And California ranks 34th.
Right.
So in all fairness, Tennessee on this evaluation is 32nd, so it's not very good.
Wow. Yeah, I think, California, a little bit, somewhere in this equation, Jeff, is the middle class in California, which is really being squeezed out. California has what's called like a barbell economy. You sort of have high skill, high wage jobs on one end, and then you got low skill, low wages on the other end, and you've got the sort of the middle class in the middle, which is squeezed and sort of losing its footing based on the regulation, inflation, cost of living, housing, insurance, all the things we've been talking about. It's kind of a mess if you're stuck in the middle. That's where we were, in the middle, and it wasn't working.
Yeah. Oh, so California is very desirable weather. The climate, the topography, the proximity to oceans, the ability to exercise outside, play tennis, golf, hang out on the beach. These are all, wonderful leisure activities that California has in abundance. The problem that you have in California is that it's based or built a lot like a third world nation, where you have, this is the Gini coefficient bringing this out, where you have extreme wealth and you don't have extreme poverty like you do in third world nations, but you have poverty, and you see it in the homelessness, the amounts of homelessness you have in California.
I saw it firsthand.
You don't see homelessness like that in many other places. Now, again, if you're going to be homeless, being homeless in Florida or Texas or California is probably better than being
average summer temperature of 82 in
Detroit or Chicago or New York City, and so. That sort of hollowing out of the middle is precisely what I always thought that Democratic policies were supposed to prevent, the hollowing out of the middle. They were supposed to build up the middle. But in fact, we see that they do just the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, back to the middle class for a second. I mean, the challenge that vexes every governor, every lawmaker in California, politics aside for a second, is how to make California more affordable, and nobody seems to have an answer. How do you make California more affordable? Based on the cost and the regulation and the heavy burden, obviously of supporting a lot of an undocumented population, infrastructure, schools, healthcare, housing, those things all cost money, and it's got to come from somewhere. It's going to be very interesting, Jeff, if Gavin Newsom runs for president. I don't know how he's going to run on.
Now, when you say he's going to run for president of Guatemala.
Well, Guatemala, yeah. If Newsom runs for president, it's going to be interesting.
Or some other dysfunctional state. That's where the angle I was getting at.
Right. Yeah. If he runs for
third world nation, he's got the credentials. I can run for president of a third world nation because I've run a third world nation.
Yeah, but if he runs for president, he's essentially sort of trying to say he's going to run on the platform of the successes and failures of California, and who in Middle America is going to espouse to be in so many respects like California. I think the fires really, it's heartbreaking to think about what people lost and why. And the environment, the progressive environmental laws in California, coupled with the regulation, coupled with the heavy burden. Jeff, in California, they just passed a law in 2000, just recently, in the last few months, that says it's now against the law for a school to inform their parents, the parents of a child who is asking to be called by different pronouns. Imagine a teacher is breaking the law, calling you or I and saying, by the way, just want you to know your daughter wants to be called Steve or Stevie or I don't know. Anyway, point is they passed a law. It seems a little nuts. In the meantime, they passed a law that is allowing cannabis cafes. So you can go eat weed, but you can't call the parents of a high school or junior high kid and say, your kid, by the way, when he gets to school, is putting on a dress.
I suspect if you have enough of that weed, you're going to say a lot of crazy things. You're going to find yourself in jail.
Yeah, yes, exactly. We should not do any more weed before our podcast.
So one of the problems, with the lack of affordable housing in California, we kind of alluded to it, regulatory burdens, right? California is very high in regulatory burdens. And so what they do is they impose these onerous restrictions on developers. So now in Los Angeles, Los Angeles building code requires anyone who wants to put up apartment buildings, for each unit in that building, you have to have 2 parking spaces made available.
There's no real estate for 2 parking spaces.
So the real estate's very expensive. And so, and moreover, people are trying to move away, right? The environmental class wants to move away from reliance on vehicles to get around. And so why would you force people to have parking spaces for people who don't even want cars?
They're banning cars, right? Meanwhile, you must have 2 parking spaces.
We're trying to get rid of cars, and then we're also going to make sure that you have to have 2 parking spaces for each unit. So that's on average, about a $30,000 increase in price for each unit when you're building. So if you want to build more apartments, more affordable apartments, you do not want to regulate and require parking spaces that people may or may not even use.
Imagine not. So in other words, it's the regulation. It's not. It's a double hit for the builders. One, you have to have the space to put the parking spaces. 2,
and space that you can't use then for apartments.
Right.
You see, that's the real problem. If you were going to build that space, a higher value use of that space would be building more apartments rather than housing cars.
This is the supply and demand thing, right? This is that equation. All of a sudden, this is where the thing gets out of kilter.
So wherever, it doesn't matter where you are. Any kind of restrictions you can impose on housing ends up creating a scarcity of housing.
It's a piece of string. You can pull it, right?
It doesn't matter. So if you impose a rent control, well, there are going to be fewer apartments because developers cannot sell them for the value of the property where they are. Or they won't keep up the property because they're not earning enough profit to maintain the property. This is for any regulator out there who wants to hear this. If you want more housing, you have to reduce your regulations and allow developers to build housing. Who are they going to build housing for? Wealthy people. Well, that's not good. We don't want to have more high-end housing. The more high-end housing you have means that the people who can afford it will move from their existing apartment or their existing condo to the brand new Class A. They're moving up, and now they've just then made vacant a unit, an apartment or a condo that someone else will buy. A middle-class person or an upper middle-class person, they'll move into that, and then where the middle-class person was living, that will be freed up. And so you create a lot more housing that's decent housing by creating housing for the Tony class who wants to always live in the nicest, poshest environment.
Which brings us back to the Palisades situation, which I apparently the guy that ran for governor against Bass, Karen Bass she's got a problem on her hands that I don't know if she's going to survive politically. Caruso, the guy that ran against her for mayor, he's a billionaire, and he's partnered apparently with the owner of Airbnb and a company called Samara, and they are proposing to offer free temporary structures. These are prefabbed houses. They pull them off a truck and set them down. They're 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and they're offering them to the Pacific Palisades residents, many of whom cannot afford to rebuild on their existing lot. Now, interesting, if you know anything quickly about the Pacific Palisades community, it is, amongst them, perhaps the most desirable of a few dozen communities in the country, in my opinion. It is a beautiful bedroom community. There's a sense of communal fabric, and there's only 20,000, 22,000, 23,000 people. The whole town is on the water, right up. You can see the pictures. So you can imagine these people are used to living this lifestyle and in these beautiful homes that are now leveled and gone, potentially toxic soil, and this temporary prefab 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that they're going to get for free to live on. A very different life than they had before the environmental progressives and the prohibitive statutes for clearing underbrush, which would have prevented many of the fires. Another podcast.
So in San Francisco, it takes on average 3 years to go through the building approval process for getting a building permit, and so the city makes available roughly, because of this permitting process, this delay, roughly 4,000 units are built in a year. It has a backlog of currently 82,000 units. And so that backlog will never get cleared when they're building 4,000, only building 4,000. This is a big city. Only 4,000 units are being developed.
Well, and also, Jeff, think for a second about the supply chain issues. When you set out to build something and it takes 3 years, 3 years later, you may not be able to get the I-beams and the wood, right? And the shingles at the certain price that right? How do you know what things are going to cost, what labor is going to cost, what the real estate's going to cost, what the materials are going to cost, and what the labor is going to cost 3 years down the road?
So you want to get all these sort of, it shouldn't take 3 years to file a permit and get a permit passed for building, a building permit.
Just imagine if you're a builder, I don't know how you survive in that environment.
So one other thing that California has, in spades is the ability to squander money. So in 2008, Arnold, the governor of California then, he shepherded in this high-speed rail project.
Oh boy,
you remember this? So at the time, they were going to build a route from Los Angeles to San Francisco. And it was supposed to cost, at that time, $33 billion and be completed in 2020. So far, California has...
Hold on to your chair.
Yeah. Now, this is mostly California money, but some of it's federal. I think about $3 billion is federal dollars. They've spent $16 billion, and they don't have any route at all built yet. Nothing. You can't get on a high-speed train, and go anywhere in California.
So they're 5 times over cost. And
so now...
And waiting 5 years behind, and they still haven't built anything.
Correct. So the new U.S. The Department of Transportation head, Sean Duffy, who I just learned he was a MTV Real World contestant. That's apparently in the 90s.
What could prepare you more for being the secretary of the?
I'll give him this though. I'll give him this. He was just in California, and he was telling them he's going to claw back $4 billion of federal dollars because this project is scuttled.
It's even more potentially insidious. The allegations are that there's bad corruption going on. Trump.
Well, of course there's corruption going on. How do you spend $16 billion and not have anything built?
Somebody's got a lot of money in the bank somewhere.
Somebody's got money in the bank. So now they're saying it's going to be $106 billion more to finish this
You say that with that's breathless.
106 billion. And so
For what? Like for a train to go?
it's a high-speed train. You know,
I mean,
trains do not work. They're not cost effective in North America. Really, in Europe, in Asia, you have a kind of a density where trains actually can be economically.
Move so many people at once.
Yes, it could be economically feasible. People also just have a different proxemic, requirement there. They don't mind being
personal
right up
space.
against each other.
Personal
That's right.
space. Yeah.
So now, in contrast, there is a private company that's building what's known as the Brightline West route from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. And they've gotten $2.5 billion in federal funding. They've already broken ground. They've already started doing the heavy.
A bargain basement price of $2.5 billion to break ground.
The whole project. No, they've raised $12 billion in private money, and the federal government has put in $2.5 billion. Heavy groundwork has already taken place. They expect to have this thing up and running in a few years.
And this is private enterprise.
Private enterprise.
One of the tenets of our
So why are people? Why is California so interested in high-speed trains? I think it's to get all the people out of California. Their citizens want to get out of California, and so they're building this high-speed train to Vegas to get them out.
To extend the train. I think we're out of time.
I think we are too.
Thanks, Jeff. See you next time.
Thank you.
See you, man.